Hi there, welcome to today's webinar presentation on selling your value. My name is Chris East, Director here at East Partners, and I'm going to be talking to you today about this very topic. For those of you who have joined me on previous webinar sessions that I've run, I like to start with a thought for the day, and today's is no different. And it's quite a short and sharp little quote here. Stop selling and start helping. You might be thinking at this point, why on earth have I got an accountant talking to me about selling? It seems to be a little bit of a strange combination, I guess. I'm drawing really, I suppose, on about 20, 25 years of experience of seeing what works and what doesn't work with clients, running small businesses, the ones that do this well and the ones that don't. And the ones that do it well are the ones that exactly follow this whole premise, where they are not selling as such. They're actually looking to genuinely help their customers. So what are we going to talk about today? So we're going to have a look at, what is selling? What is really a practical definition of selling, the different types of sellers that there are out there that we've all experienced in our day-to-day lives. The top 10 things that I've listed that, based on my experience and what I've seen, the must-dos. And what some of those essential ingredients are in terms of creating value, the various techniques that are there that really do work and create real buy-in. How to overcome those objections that invariably arise, that we all have at some stage on the sales journey, what your next steps are, and how we can potentially be able to help. Before we get in, usual disclaimer, this is general information. It's certainly not a substitute for specific tailored advice that is relating directly to your own circumstances. So treat it as being general advice. All right, so what is selling? Well, the dictionary claims it to be the exchange of a commodity for money. In a more practical sense, let's look at it as being the exchange of goods or services in return for money. So let's think about this concept. Will the value of the goods or services need to be worth more or less than the money your customer or client will part with? The value has to be higher. I don't think anyone will disagree with that. So if we agree that the value has to be higher in that particular situation, who then determines what the value is? Is it you as the business owner, or is it your customer? It should be, arguably every time, the customer. So the takeaway point on that is to say, let's not forget that the value, and I'm emphasizing value, is perceived, again, emphasizing that, by the customer. Value is perceived by the customer. Perhaps write that down. With that in mind, it's our job to articulate what the value is to them. And I'll cover off on what that value is as we go further. So when is a sale made? This is where perhaps I'll put my accountant hat on and look at it firstly through the lens of perhaps a sales trainer. And typically, if any of you have ever done a sales training course, they typically focus on a sale being when you get the verbal acceptance, when a proposal's signed, the deal's done. So that's when they generally would say, well, yes, a sale is completed at that point. So with that in mind, then how many of us have perhaps celebrated a sale when the customer has said that they'll buy, but then we find that they never actually follow through? This is where I'll put my accountant hat on and say, that's not when the sale is made. The sale is when the cash is actually banked. So when we work with small business owners in looking at their sales process and helping them with their sales plans and so forth, we look to review when the sales process actually happens, or what the sales process actually is, to ensure that the process extends right through to the point of when the sale is banked, not just when the customer says yes. So again, with my accountant hat on, looking through my accountant lens, I want to see cash flow grow for your small business, not just your sales. After all, if you don't collect your accounts receivables, your debtors, you'll go broke, regardless of how big your sales results are. I like to use a little saying. It's not mine. I've used it plenty of times with clients over a long, long time. And it's this: sales are vanity, profit is sanity, cash flow is reality. So if we're just focusing on that top line and just looking at our sales, we're pumping our own tires up. It's vanity. It doesn't mean anything. You can have massive sales and your business can still go broke. If you're not collecting the money from those sales, then you will have a major cash flow problem. So yes, the sales made when the cash is banked. Let's now move on to what are the different types of seller. And some of us might be able to relate to one or maybe more of these various traits, and we may well have even experienced it when we're the customer. First up is the order taker, and the order taker in effect sits back and waits for the sale to come to them. So if we think about a scenario where, let's say it's a takeaway food store, the person behind the counter, they're waiting for the order to come. They're not really having to do much. They're just waiting for the order to turn up. Sometimes that even happens in other retail settings. It may even be happening in your business. So if that is, what activities could you be doing in your business that are not only order taking, but perhaps shouldn't be order taking? So think about examples where perhaps we're being reactive and waiting for the sales to come. Might be worth noting those down. And as I said, what can you be doing to be more proactive instead of waiting for the sale to land in your lap? Oh, the next one is the product pusher, and I'm sure we've all experienced the product pusher. Maybe we've even been the product pusher where we've been really keen to make that sale. And that's exactly what the product pusher is. They try to sell many different products regardless of whether they'll benefit the customer or not. Typically, they don't listen to what the customer actually wants. They just want to make that sale. They just want to meet their sales target. So if we think about that, do we really know what our customers want? What actions can you be taking to find out what your customers really do want? And perhaps it's worth to make a note of that. Examples might be customer surveys, feedback from events that you've run, or simply asking how you could be of further help once you've delivered a service or sold a product. It's getting to know our customers better. Next up, we've got the overseller, and they essentially will say anything to get the sale, whether or not it's true. They just want that sale. They'll just put enough mayo on their story to get that sale over the line. For them, the only thing that matters is the sale. And it does not matter, a little bit like the product pusher, it really doesn't matter whether the sale ends up being in the best interest of their customer or not. You might have heard the term, under promise, over deliver, and thinking about that in terms of a sales process, looking to under promise and over deliver. I have a little bit of a problem with that, because typically, from my perspective, I think simply deliver on what your customer is looking for. If you articulate their need or their want and are able to satisfy that in the most effective way possible and give them a good experience and be consistent, I don't think the under promise and over deliver necessarily has to come into it. But let's perhaps consider maybe that premise, the under promise and over deliver, when we pick on the poor old stereotypical car salesperson. Do you think that generally applies in that sort of sales setting? So remember, our aim is to help our customers and improve their lives with whatever our products or services are, not just to sell them to our customers. If people feel they're being sold to, they'll start to feel differently about you. Remember that perception. that I was talking about before. If a customer feels like they're being sold to, they'll perceive you as essentially being the product pusher, the overseller. And ultimately then in that scenario, the biggest risk is that you'll lose your customer's trust and they'll walk away and they won't come back. So really, bottom line is you don't really want to be seen as being the overseller in your customer's eyes. And the last type of seller is the problem solver. And arguably, this is perhaps where we want to be. This type of seller, the problem solver, identifies the problems the customer is experiencing and then offers solutions in the form of products or services. So let's think about this first one, the want versus the need of the customer. It's important because often the customer's wants and what they need are quite different. So it's important to be able to distinguish between these and articulate to the customer what they really need. So let's take an example of a person who might want to buy a Ferrari, but they have 3 kids that they regularly need to transport to school, to after school activities and so forth. In that particular case, a little extreme, I agree, but what they need is not what they want. So likewise, a customer might want to, they might want their rusty roof painted, but what they really need is a brand new roof. Now we need to think about, as the problem-solving salesperson, we need to think about benefits versus features. And it's another important distinction that needs to be made. We need to highlight benefits of a product or service to a customer, defining the value they'll get from the purchase, instead of trying to justify what is involved. So then focusing on the features. So if we focus in on the benefits rather than the features, we're more likely that the customer is going to perceive the value to be greater than the price. So let's go back to that rusty roof example. If it ends up being a paint job, which, obviously it's going to be a fairly band-aid type solution. Yes, it will certainly be cheaper than a new roof, but we must be in a position where we need to be able to sell the value of a new roof to this customer if we're the salesperson for the roofing company. So as an example, a new roof will ensure that the customer's roof stops leaking. It therefore reduces their stress. It reduces the likelihood of damage to contents. There's less time cleaning up water and so forth. The problem will be solved long-term while reducing potentially energy costs, potentially increasing the value of their home and so forth. These are all benefits. And these are the things that if we take the time to understand our customer, will come to light. The features of the new roof, such as what it's made of and the look of the flashings and so forth, really aren't that relevant. So why spend the time banging on about the features when really we need to be talking about the benefits? So segueing then into the top 10 must-dos, and as I said earlier, these are really things that I've picked up from working with small business clients over a long time, as well as my own experience and refining our own process that we use in my business. And the first one is be clear on your target market. You really don't want to be wasting time selling to customers who aren't a good fit for you. Maybe when we're in the early stages of our business, perhaps, yes, anyone that's got cash and a heartbeat, we'll sell to them. But let's be clear on who our target market is and make sure that message is clear. And from that, be in a position where you can articulate your value in one sentence. This is hard. It took me quite some time to be able to actually be able to achieve this. But when you can, you're then in a position to say, or to be able to convey what the value is that matters most to your customers. And from there, commit to what you promise. Don't underestimate the value of follow through, which can speed up the sale and be able to build credibility. Use a sales system and stick to it, emphasizing the stick to it. The system should be clearly broken down into steps for you and your team to be able to follow to increase efficiency and reduce the potential for errors and reworks and so forth. Remember to ask and not to tell. As I said before, the benefits versus features. It's that sort of mindset. Not every customer situation is going to be the same. So don't assume you know what the customer or client's going to need from you. Ask lots of questions to truly understand, build that connection, build that trust. Focus on the benefits, not the features, as I said. Remember to articulate what's in it for the customer. What's in it for me? WIIFM. It's that FM radio station that we all listen to. What's in it for me? So think about that from the customer's viewpoint. Establish the value before quoting the price. The value to the customer must exceed the price for them in order for them to buy, and offer them options, or what I like to call a choice of yeses. The question changes from should I buy to which option should I choose. It's a very subtle but a very big difference. Should I buy as against what option and am I going to choose? Because in that scenario, if you've got options, the buying decision is made easier for your customer. Focus on the relationship and not the sale. It might take a few interactions before the customer is ready to buy. I certainly have had that in my own business. We've had clients that have been on our database for several years in some instances before they've been ready to move ahead. And you may well have that same sort of scenario. And the last one, under promise, over deliver, or as I said earlier, be consistent in the delivery of your solutions to your customers. Do what you say you are going to do. Okay, let's have a look now. It's at the three essentials in order to create value. And really, these components are quite critical in the approaches that I've just been talking about. If a customer declines to buy from you, it's generally because they don't see the value. And they generally don't see the values because it just hasn't been articulated well enough for them to understand. I'm sure we've all been guilty, I know I have, of not articulating the value clearly enough. Sometimes you're trying to articulate value to people who aren't even on your target or aren't even part of your target market. And again, I think we can perhaps put our hand up and say, yeah, probably been occasions where that's happened too. All right, so firstly, we're going to look at the service component. And look, most people expect good service. I don't think that's really a very strange concept. We all expect good service, but do we always get it? So with that in mind, some questions you might like to ask yourself from a service perspective is, what do you do that's exceptional? Not just what is expected, what's exceptional that you do? What else could you be doing? How can you demonstrate this to your prospective customers? Is your service level consistent across your business? Do some team members need training to be able to bring their consistency up? Or do they need to be shown the door of opportunity, i.e. worked out of the business, if they're not performing? And you bring in people who are perhaps a little more aligned. Remember that bad news travels fast. I think we all know that in this era of social media, bad Google reviews and so forth. So, hey, if you're not providing good service, your customers are going to hear about it, and they can hear about it really quick. From a quality perspective, well, I guess it should be a given, but how often, a little bit like service, how often do we get that? How can you get previous customers to articulate the quality they've experienced from your products or services? Things like money back guarantees, could that be something which helps to build that whole quality notion? And then we look at price. Before we get to price, you should have asked plenty of questions to understand the problems your customer requires a solution for and the value that you can deliver through offering that solution. So with that in mind, where are you positioned in terms of price relative to your competition? Because if the value you provide is greater than the price, a sale will happen. Make sure your price is connected to the value. If you're at the high end, use that to your advantage so that you can promote your quality. If you're in the market for a heart surgeon, I would argue you're probably not going to be going for the cheapest. You probably want to be going for the best. Price is not really going to come into it in that particular scenario. So building the value in your product or service will build trust in your brand. And I think we all know a trusted brand is far more likely to be successful. It'll generate referrals. Overall, it's going to be a much better position to be in. So yes, striving for that trusted and approved brand. Now we're going to have a look at a few sales techniques that could well increase your sales. And the first one is the formula for change. And I've used this in a few different presentations in the past. And again, it's not my work. It's outlined here on the screen. But has really been, I guess, popularized in terms of certainly a small business concept when we look at scenarios where change is required, or as we've had in the last few years with the whole COVID situation, change is more or less forced upon us. The first component of this formula, being R, represents the customer's resistance to change. So if we build up the variables to the left, being the D, V, and F, we can help overcome that resistance that the customer may have and have more of a chance of the sale happening. But first up, we need to have a look at dissatisfaction. And dissatisfaction comes with the status quo. We want to be building up the level of dissatisfaction in the client, and that comes through our ability to ask effective questions. The V represents the vision of a future positive state. It's the picture we want to paint for the customer or client through the solution that we can offer that more or less solves their dissatisfaction that they have with the current state of affairs that they have. And then we want to make it easy. We want to provide those first steps that the customer can take towards achieving the vision that we've just painted with them. So it's really important to understand this formula instinctively. The formula makes it clear why change often doesn't happen. And in me saying that, without dissatisfaction with the here and now, a vision for the future and the ability to take simple steps towards that vision, it just won't happen. So following this process through, if we, as I said, we establish that dissatisfaction position through effective questioning, we paint that vision, we make it easier for the customer to buy and outline those steps, the likelihood of resistance is minimized. Secondly, we want to have a look at the spin cycle. And it's important to remember that clients or customers come to you because they generally want something. However, it may not necessarily be what they actually need. As I said earlier, the want and need scenario of the Ferrari is two very different things at play. But the bottom line is there's likely to be an underlying problem as to why the customer may want a particular item or service. So as the small business owner, we need to be able to help our customers join the dots between what they want and what they need. Because this will allow you to offer your clients, your customers, the choice of yeses that I outlined earlier. They could purchase what they originally wanted, or they could purchase what they actually need to solve their underlying problems. So how do we go about joining those dots between the wants and needs? So first up, we need to be asking those questions to understand the customer situation. So as examples, why would you like to purchase this particular product or service? What will you be using it for? What else will you be doing? So forth, so forth, so forth. Through that, we can then start to identify the problems that the customer, the client might be experiencing. We can then start to understand the impact of not solving their problems. And then we can then look at saying or identifying what the customer needs to do to solve their problem. And simplistically, that's just saying, well, they need to purchase our product or our service. All right, ask and don't tell. This reminds us to engage with our customers by asking them questions. This is a common theme that you might be starting to pick up. It's important to begin asking questions to find out what your customer needs until you reach the point of engagement where the customer starts asking you questions instead. So as an example, a conversation may go like this. The salesperson asks, how are your sales tracking right now? And the potential customer says, oh, they've dropped off a bit since COVID hit. So what have you tried so far to increase sales? Well, I've increased my advertising. Are your team members achieving the same sales outcomes as you are? No, for some reasons, I seem to be having better results than them. So what sales training have you provided your team? I've shared a few ideas with them, but nothing formal. Are you aware that we offer a value-based sales coaching service? No, I don't. What does that involve? Well, we work together to start setting up a sales action plan where we get clear on what we're wanting to achieve and the processes needed to get there. Oh, that's interesting. How much does that cost? Well, there are a number of options. Okay, and you start to get a bit of an idea through that interaction. The point here is that until you're showing some genuine interest in asking questions of your potential customer or client, you are not engaged or interested. And again, it's that perception as I was talking about a little earlier. All right, the old book a meeting from a meeting. Some of these stats are quite interesting. And the first one I think is quite is really quite staggering, considering I think we all know how much it costs to get a new client or a new customer through our door. And we have that opportunity to engage, yet 1 in 2 engagements potentially never come to anything because there's no follow-up. And if there is follow-up, it's only followed up once. A lot of sales take a lot of interactions. And as it has on the slide here, 80% of sales are made on the 5th or subsequent contact. I certainly know that there are some stats out there that suggest it's even longer. And depending in the type of industry or business that you're in, it may even be a dozen, 14 touch points before someone is ready to actually engage you, buy from you. So the book a meeting from a meeting concept that we're talking about here is really looking to say, once you've had that initial contact, look to establish a further point of contact at that time. So let's say if you are in professional services and you've had a prospective client come to you and you're reaching the conclusion of the meeting, let's get that diary out and saying, right, when will be a good time to catch up to look at how we may be able to engage further, and making sure that that process remains open rather than having to re-establish all over again subsequently, or maybe worse, never been re-established because the opportunity has been let slip. Overcoming objections. It's often a part of making a sale and means the prospect isn't convinced of the value that you're offering. That's when we will get those objections. And typically they're around, oh, I don't have the time, I don't have the money, whatever it may be. So let's, in this particular scenario, we need to go back to that formula for change that we spoke about before. If your prospect has an objection, drill down into the dissatisfaction, build that vision, and make the first steps easier. In these sorts of scenarios, it's also pretty handy to have things like testimonials or case studies. They're great to show how others in a similar position have benefited from buying your products or services. I really recommend this one. I use this quite a bit to illustrate that, yes, there's other people, there's other small business owners out there that are having these challenges. And here are the sorts of things that we did for them in these sorts of scenarios, just like what you're experiencing. It helps to put some more context and paints you in perhaps a more credible, a more trustworthy light as well. And finally, we look at the AQUA technique, which really is saying acknowledge, question, understand, and answer. So acknowledge the way a person is feeling and the objection that they have. Then ask some questions around what they mean about the objection they've raised with you. What is it about the solution you're offering that isn't going to give them what they've said that they want? Understand their objection and show that you understand them by paraphrasing. So more or less you start with something like saying, oh, so if I understand you correctly, da, 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 and on you go. And finally, you can then answer, but only after you've done the first 3 steps. So you can revisit the proposal or the offer that you put on the table and then think about, well, is there an alternative that may be able to be implemented? So the sales action plan, this is the concise plan for your sales department. Now, if you're a team of 1, you are the sales department. If you're a team of 100, you may have dedicated sales managers and salespeople within your business. Either way, the sales action plan begins by setting your budget for the year. The process we take with this is that we break down your overall sales budget into key components, set targets for each quarter, and during each accountability session, again, that's done quarterly, we would update quarterly targets and reflect on the actual results so that you stay on track to achieve your annual budget. We'll generally set KPIs or key performance indicators for the year and each quarter in agreement with the business owner to then make sure that those are clearly articulated. We look to identify the opportunities available to the business, the vulnerabilities that need to be managed, and then once all that's done, we set sales goals for the year and break those down into 90-day targets and along with actions to be able to achieve those goals. That's in effect what I think an effective sales action plan is. And I've just articulated there the steps we would typically take with a client in helping them to be able to get to that point. So my aim of today's presentation to you is to help you take what you've learned today and implement some positive change into your business. So it's been presenting these ideas for your thoughts. And so right now, what do I do? So what do you do? Doing nothing, I would argue, is not an option. If you've done what you've always done in the past, then don't expect anything to change tomorrow. If you're not happy with what's going on, then arguably something needs to be done about that. So commit to doing something. Make a clear plan that you can articulate to your team. And if you're a team of 1, that still doesn't matter. Still make that plan. Focus on what you can do as opposed to worrying about what's out of your control. This applies to so many things in sales, in our business, in our own lives. Let's just worry about our own pond and not what's outside of our pond that we've got no control over. And if you need some help, This is why we're here. This is why we run these sessions. This is why we exist, is to be able to assist small business owners in improving things just like this. So what are some of the things that you can look at doing? Well, first up is looking at creating your sales action plan. And I just ran through the steps as to how we would typically work with a small business owner to make that happen. The plan pulls together the ideas that we've shared today, sets out clear targets, goals, and actions for you to implement. Beyond the plan is where we look down and sit down and offer ongoing coaching, either to you or to your team members or both. This way we ensure the actions in the plan become reality. We bring the theory to life. We make it, we practice the theory, if you like. And we make sure that the skills and the techniques are committed to memory, and we work on those so that not only are skills being developed, but we're getting real outcomes in terms of results. But hey, if you're not quite ready to commit to a paid service, that's absolutely fine. Happy to send a complimentary formula for change worksheet that you can complete. If you want a copy, call the office, email the office, happy to get one to you. The worksheet will help you define those questions you can ask that can build the dissatisfaction with the status quo that your customers have and help build their vision of what life will look like if they buy from you. The worksheet also helps you define the choices of yeses, all those sales options you can provide to your customer or client. And you can use this worksheet for as many of your different products or services as you wish. And if you're joining us today and you're not yet one of our clients and you'd like to have a discussion of how we could perhaps help improve your sales process, improve your cash flow outcomes, improve your business and overall life, hey, reach out, schedule a complimentary meeting, no obligation. The first meeting you have with us is free. So as we pull towards the end of today's presentation, I'd like to leave you with this parting thought. And it's from Brian Tracy, who's written lots of self-help books and so forth over the years. I've read some of them. He really does know his stuff. And he said, approach each customer with the idea of helping him or her solve a problem or achieve a goal, not of selling a product or service. Similar to what was put at the start of the presentation. Stop selling, start helping. Look to help your customers rather than flog them something. So out of today, make that plan. Make that simple plan today to commit to at least 3 actions that you'll take as a result of the presentation that you've just experienced, and write them down. Please write them down. If they're not written down, in my mind, they don't exist. And give those actions an owner and a completion date. And if you're the team of 1, doesn't matter. If you're a team of 100, doesn't matter. Still do that. Write the actions you're going to take, give them an owner and a completion date. And remember, if we can be of assistance, please get in touch. Thanks for taking some time out today to join us here. Hope you've got plenty of ideas out of today's session, and I look forward to joining you next time.